Hello and welcome to this lesson about graphing inequalities. The learning target of this video is to graph inequalities and then to write inequalities from a graph. So we're going to go both ways with it. I want to start off by making an analogy and kind of explaining the difference from equals. So if we take something like x equals 2, what we're doing is we've put ourselves into sort of a box. And this box, you can kind of label it as a one answer box. And our one and only answer can be x equals 2. That's it. Now, when we say something like x is less than 2, we now have many possible answers. So many possible answers. So we could have x be 1, we could have x be 0, we could have x be any of the negative numbers, we could have x be 1.5. We have all kinds of options. And so that's one thing we have to keep in mind, is that we have many possible answers when we use an inequality. Another example I have for you, or an analogy, is think about a situation where you use cash to buy something. Now, if you ride a bus, you might have to have exact change. You know, so like let's say it costs $1.25 to ride the $1.25 to ride the bus, and if you have $2, you might not get your money back. They might just kind of keep the change because maybe they don't have a thing that will give you change. But if you go to a grocery store and you spend $2 on something that costs $1.25, you'd get change back. And so that's kind of the analogy we're working with. When you're on a bus, you have to have exact change. There's one thing you can have. But you know, when you go to a store and you use money, you're going to get change. So you have a variety of ways you can pay. You know, you can pay with a $5 bill, a $10 bill, a $20 bill, and stuff like that. Now, let's talk about the fine print. Some of the details here. So we have to understand what's kind of going on with the inequality symbols. First thing, I want to go over something that sometimes students struggle to remember. Which one is which? So the one on the left there, this is less than. And the one on the right is greater than. So greater than. And so yeah, sometimes students struggle to understand how to even say this. And if you can't say it, it's hard to do some of the problems. And then the analogy I like to give for how you can remember which one is which is if you take a good look at the less than symbol, and let's kind of bring it down here, it kind of goes through this evolution, if you will. So less than, and then maybe you get a little sloppier with it, and you get a little sloppier with it. And before you know it, you have an L, which is like less than. The second point I want to get across is the difference between less than and less than or equal to. And same idea with greater than or equal to. When it comes to graphing, you're going to use different sort of notation. So for less than, you're going to use an open circle on your graph. And then for less than or equal to, you're going to use a closed circle on your graph. And the same goes for greater than. You'll use an open circle, and then you're going to use a closed circle for greater than or equal to. And so the way I like to think of it is that if it requires more ink to write your inequality symbol, it's going to require more ink for you to draw it on the graph. The final fine print detail I want to give you is a trick, and it's what I call the arrow trick. I'm going to use a different color here. So the arrow trick. Now, there's a little bit of a catch with this. This only works with the variable on the left. Okay, so the arrow trick. Let's say we have x is less than 3. Well, what you can do is you make an arrow out of your inequality symbol. So we take less than, and we're going to make a little arrow out of it. And what that tells us is which way the graph is going to go when you graph this on a number line. But again, that only works if the variable is on the left-hand side. Okay? So now let's do some actual examples here. Enough talking, let's do stuff. So yeah, let's take a look at something like x is less than 3 as our first example. So when it comes to graphing these inequalities, what we want to do is make a number line. At the very least, you just have to have the number that you're being asked to sort of graph around on it. If you want to, you can put some other numbers on it, so like maybe 0 and then 6. And then you go to the number in question, so in that case 3. Take a look at your inequality symbol. What do we have here? Well, we have a less than, and so that less than is going to translate to an open circle. So we'll put an open circle at 3, and then since the variable's on the left-hand side, we can do the arrow trick and point an arrow to the left. And just to verify, take a number and see if the statement is true. So 0 is on the left-hand side. 0 less than 3, question mark? And the answer is yes, that is true. So that means you've done it right. Now, let's do another example. But this time, let's kind of put, or actually, this time let's put the variable on the other side. So let's say 5 is greater than or equal to x. So again, what we'll do is make a number line. We'll put the number in question, 5, and then maybe put some other numbers on there, so 0 and 10, just to kind of give us some perspective. And since I'm using a less than or greater than or equal to, I need a closed circle. Because I could let x equal 5 and it'd still be true. 5 is greater than or equal to 5. 5 greater than or equal to 5. That's a true statement because of the equal to part of it. So now I have to figure out which way is it going. So this is saying 5 is greater than x. And if you're confused, pick some numbers and see what happens. So let's use 0. Is 5 greater than or equal to 0? Or is 5 greater than or equal to 10? This bottom one is false, but this one is true. So that means I'm going to go this way. Now notice my arrow trick doesn't work, and that's because the variable is on the right-hand side. So that's how you graph these inequalities. You simply just put the number in question on the number line, check to see if you need an open circle or a closed circle, and then find out which direction it's going. And so you have a couple of ways you can do that. If the variable's on the left, you can use the arrow trick, but you could also always do this thing right here where you're just testing some numbers, see which works. So now let's talk about how to write an inequality. So the way we'll write an inequality is you have to be given a graph. Say we have 8, 0, 16. All right, and our graph looks like this. So first thing we'll do is we'll extract our number because we sort of have 3 spaces that we need to fill. One of them will be a variable. I like to put the variable on the left. Technically, it doesn't have to be on the left, but it's preferred to be on the left. All right, so put the variable on the left, then we'll put the number, 8, and now it's all about the inequality. So take a look at what we have here. I'm noticing an open circle. So with an open circle, that means I have an inequality that does not have an equal to. It's either going to be less than or greater than. And since I put my variable on the left-hand side, I can do the arrow trick. And it would have to be the greater than one. So x is greater than 8. Let's do one more example to wrap things up here. So draw my graph. Let's put 22 on it. And then let's go with a closed circle going that way. So again, I got 3 spaces I need to fill. I need my variable. I need my inequality. So I'll write that right here. Inequality. And finally, I need my number. So my variable is going to be x. My number is 22. And then my inequality, I'm noticing that it's a closed circle. So that means I'm either doing less than or equal to or greater than or equal to. And since the variable's on the left, I'm able to use the arrow trick and realize it's got to be less than or equal to. So that in a nutshell is how you graph and write inequalities based off of a graph. Good luck and let me know if you have any questions.